This is a ManeHustle Media podcast.
Yo, this is Sharmane from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
Hey y'all, welcome to Militantly Mixed, a podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, Sharmane, aka Mixed Girl Mane. And before we get into this week's episode, I just want to send out a big thank you to the folks who have been sending me messages via social media or emails about my recent loss of my cat Ronan. I'm still very much in mourning. I will be mourning him forever, but I am still in that heavy, deeply emotional section of grief. And while I do try to get through my solo recordings without getting choked up when I bring him up, because I am alone right now in my room, and the only beings around me are my cats, just bringing him up chokes me up. So I'm still very much in that. It is getting a little bit easier to talk about him without being moved to tears. But I notice when I am alone or when I'm with my husband, I can't help but do it. And this is like my fourth take of trying to record this intro. And I'm just going to have to settle with it and just be like, this is what it is now. For a period of time, every time I bring him up, I'm going to be choked up. So I guess that's just who I am right now. When I'm with people, though, face to face, and I bring him up, I don't get choked up because I'm very, very, very well conditioned not to cry in front of people. And it takes a long time of friendship or closeness before I do start to choke up or tear up in front of people. I have a lot of baggage about crying in front of people or being vulnerable. So the last couple weeks when I have been obviously crying on my recordings, I couldn't stop, and I couldn't get a clean recording without it. So I just eventually had to put out what was available because I couldn't get through it. So I guess that's probably still happening. I thought I was going to be able to get through this one without it, but like I said, I'm on my fourth take, and I keep choking up every time I bring him up. So I do appreciate the heartfelt messages that I've received for people who do have pets or are animal lovers and kind of understand this depth of grief for the loss of an animal. You know, those messages were really touching. It is uncomfortable being vulnerable for me. One of the things I hear about this show from people is that they appreciate how transparent I am. And up until recently, that transparency has kind of been mostly just about things and events that have happened to me, or what seems like I should be very emotional about, but can tell the stories without a lot of emotion now, are the stories about my childhood abuse or rape or sexual assault that I've suffered, sexual harassment that I've suffered, things like that, where I can talk very openly about them in a very disconnected manner because of either dealing with those issues in therapy and just kind of now being able to talk about it without being driven to emotion, or context, I guess, of the conversation maybe that I'm having, where emotion isn't necessarily the appropriate move in that moment. Those are areas in which I've dealt with in therapy for so long that I can talk about and be very transparent about and not uncomfortable. But when emotion, especially dealing with sadness, and to a degree affection, physical affection, I struggle with that still. And that's very much a part of my conditioning from the kind of family that I come from. So I'm working on believing that it's not a problem to be emotionally vulnerable in front of people, whether that's, I guess, in person or now on my recordings. It's something I am working on. It sounds so stupid, but it's an issue for me, and it's becoming more and more apparent that I actually have some serious baggage when it comes to expressing affection or emotion in front of people, except for my husband, because he and I have been together for nearly 20 years, and I'm just used to him at this point. If you listen to my other show, Blurred Comics, it's actually a common thread in the thing where Blurred Vision is reminding me that, you know, he's my friend from a long time and cares about me, and that it's okay when I get emotional, and me just fighting it at all costs. So I am aware of my issue and I'm working on it, I guess. So that's why I eventually did just have to put out the intros for the last couple weeks where I was emotional because I couldn't not be. And I didn't want to derail the show. And as hard as it was to even get up and work during those times, because another thing that I've talked about on my shows before is that I do suffer from chronic persistent depression, and I fight off major depression fairly frequently. Last year was sort of the end of about a 2 to 3 year major bout of depression, and the podcasts really kind of stopped that for me. It kind of dug me out of that hole. And now I feel the symptoms of major depression coming back, and I'm really fighting it. A lot of it is triggered with the sickness of two of my cats and then the eventual death of Ronan, because they're my responsibility. Everything about their life is my responsibility, and so to lose them feels like a failure. Even though they're getting old and that's just part of life, I can't help that feeling that. So I am fighting major depression. I'm trying to dig in hard on the shows because that's what pulled me out last time. But the last 2 weeks, I will say, was a struggle to get through editing the episodes for all 3 shows. And thank you to Javia for her understanding and just sending me her episodes without me having to do many cuts so that I could just put it out for her. I really appreciate that she made that effort for me because it did help to not have to sit there and listen through every portion of the episodes like I normally do for these last 2 weeks, because it really was hard to just kind of be up. For people who do suffer from depression, you understand that sometimes depression is so physically painful that it is hard to do anything, and I was definitely in those moments a few times over the last couple of weeks. We also 2 weeks ago we missed the episode of Blurred Comics because I was sick too. I haven't been taking care of myself, and I was really sick, and I kind of lost my voice for the day of that show. So luckily I have enough banked episodes that I was able to keep Militantly Mixed without a break, but Blurred Comics did suffer a little bit from it, and my normal sort of clean up of the episodes, the audio cleanup and stuff like that, I was not doing. So if there is audio quality issues for the last couple of weeks, that is because I was just sort of not able to fully commit to my responsibilities for the shows. So I appreciate that people are still sticking with me and my downloads haven't decreased at all because of what I'm going through. But I'm really fighting. This is so important to me. Militantly Mixed and Blurred Comics and Black Radical Queer are so important to me in terms of just my day-to-day life. I want these shows to be successful. I'm very passionate about all of these issues that we discuss, and so I want to make sure that we keep this platform going for the folks out there that are listening to us and supporting us and needing what we're talking about as well. And so those encouraging messages that y'all send to me every week, I appreciate it. I really do. And even while the show isn't, like the most popular thing in podcasting at the moment, I'm one of only a few podcasters that focus in on mixed race. I've talked about it before on the show, but also it's going to come up in this week's episode as well. My guest today, Natalie, with her podcast Some Kind of Brown, in which we focus on more of the experience of mixedness than just that we exist in the world. So we both in different ways focus in on what it is like to be mixed, and from the mixed race perspective we're telling our own stories. As Javia says on Black Radical Queer, our stories on our own terms, and not allowing it to be filtered or mixedness or our mixed race experience to be filtered through the lens of someone who does not understand what our life is like, and maneuvering through being multi-ethnic and multicultural, and in some cases multinational, and just how we maneuver through code switching or through acceptance or desiring acceptance in different ethnic groups and things like that. So I know that the likelihood that Militantly Mixed becomes the most popular type of show on the interwebs is not really necessarily going to be a thing. What's important is that we get big enough that people have access to us. And so one thing that I don't typically do, but I should really start doing, is asking you all to share the show to somebody specific. versus just, you know, retweeting or sharing our Facebook posts and things like that, which I really appreciate because I do think we do get some more listeners that way. If there is somebody in your life that is mixed race or a monoracial person in your life that could benefit from the knowledge of people that are not like themselves, pick a specific episode of the show that you really enjoy, or an episode of the show that touched you personally, and give that to a particular person to listen to. Like, try to pick one person to say, hey, this is something I listen to, and here's why I think you would enjoy it. Because if it's a mixed race person, you may be surprised about how excited or grateful they may be to have something where their stories are being reflected back at them. Because that's the common theme of the messages that I get from listeners is, I heard myself in this story. I saw myself represented in your show. I feel reflected. And that is something that as mixed race people, we do not get very often. And so we tend to have to glom on to something that isn't quite what we are, but the closest thing to it. And that's how we attach or get connection to something in media. And at least with Militantly Mixed, you will actually get a person of mixed race heritage talking about their direct experience. And if you're mixed, you're going to be able to connect to that. And so please do pick a person this week and share an episode with, and, you know, maybe that'll help the show grow. Maybe that'll help them spread it. Yeah, I guess that's it. I don't know if I went on a tangent or if I went off track of where I was going, but I guess that's what was in my heart today. This week is the last of Women's History Month for Militantly Mixed. We focus this month on mixed race women of color podcasters. My guest this week is Natalie from the Some Kind of Brown podcast. And she and I started our podcast really close together. I think she says that I was about a month ahead of her or something like that. And both of our podcasts are about the mixed race experience. And she is still sometimes trying to figure out who she is in mixedness, but she's embraced her mixedness. And that's a different step in the mixed race identity than I'm in. And some of our guests have been people who just haven't been dealing with it yet at all. And some of our guests have been super duper grounded in the mixedness. And some of our guests are in that in-between stage or in a in-between stage. And in this particular case, my guest is like that. She knows who she is. She understands her ethnic backgrounds. She doesn't necessarily have access to the cultures of all of her ethnic backgrounds, and so she wants to make that discovery. But she is very aware of her mixedness and how it has shaped her life. And going forward, she wants to be able to, you know, tighten up her own identity in mixedness, so that as she maneuvers the world, she can just be her full mixed ass self. And we had a really great conversation. Her show is really great too because she does talk a lot about what's going on in her own life. She does have a major health issue that has impacted her show a little bit here and there. She talks a little bit about it on this episode, but you can hear a lot more about it if you check out her show. I really enjoyed talking to her, but I've also been enjoying the last 6 or so months of us messaging each other. We also share each other's episodes on Twitter and things like that. So this is another example of the difference between that I have identified, and this is entirely my opinion, is I've noticed that in mainstream podcasting, quotation fingers, talking about whiteness, you don't get a lot of this level of support and caping for each other. At least I have never gotten that sense from white podcasters that I've experienced or interacted with. But in the Black Podcasters United or the Women of Color Podcasters group or the Asian American Podcasters group that I'm in, you get the sense of these people that are so excited that you are another voice in what they're talking about that they cape for you as much as they're caping for themselves. And this is what we've got going on between Natalie and I for Some Kind of Brown and Militantly Mixed. We're two sides of a very similar coin. I focus more of the, you know, militant side of mixedness, of being out there and being in front of people so that they understand we exist and they understand how to talk to us and how to interact with us with care and with empathy, and while it may not be super duper obvious on every episode because I am talking to guests and they're sharing their experience in my own life, I have a social justice element to how I deal with my mixedness publicly. With Natalie, she focuses a lot on just trying to maneuver as a mixed race person. Like, here's my story from a Southern girl who is just trying to figure it out. And I really love her show. I love how she does it, and I'm so excited to just hear another mixed race voice. I want people to listen to her show and share in the nuances of mixedness that we talk about on our show. But if I'm the only mixed person that you're listening to, you're not going to get a full ass picture. And so I would hope that you would also consider listening to her show as well. So with that in mind, we're going to move on to my interview with Natalie. All right, and for the final week of the Mixed Race Women of Color Podcasters for Women's History Month, I never say it right, I always say women history, for Women's History Month, we are joined this week by Natalie from the Some Kind of Brown podcast. And Natalie, you and I first interacted on Twitter. You had
Yes.
you had followed me, and then on Militantly Mixed, and then I saw what your Twitter was about, so I messaged you back, and then we kind of had an exchange, and this is like months ago, kind of at the beginning of your show. I think at the
Yeah.
time you maybe had like 2 episodes out, and then we've kind of loosely kept in touch, and we certainly tag each other in a bunch of mixed race podcast
Yeah.
things often. So I'm really glad to finally actually get a chance to talk to you directly, especially because I'm familiar with your voice. That's the weirdest thing about either podcasting or anything having to do with video is I listen to you, so I feel like we've talked, but we actually have never talked.
Yeah, I had that moment of recognition when I said hi when I heard you on Skype, so it was kind of funny.
It is weird to have this, but thank you so much for joining me. And why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into it.
Okay, well, thank you for having me, first of all. But my name is Natalie, and my podcast is Some Kind of Brown. It is another mixed race podcast, but
Whoop, whoop.
mostly from the perspective of someone growing up in the South, because I think that my experiences growing up in the South might be a lot different than people growing up in the North. And I've been living in the North now for a month, and I can say that is most definitely the case, talking to some of my boyfriend's friends, that I've had some experiences that seem to be very South specific.
Yeah, when I hear your show, I do see that because I've lived in the South, but I am a Californian, and I've lived in the North too. And only people in the South really talk about how different the South is from. Oh, that's not actually true. The only people from the South talk about the North being different, whereas like
Ah.
folks in the North don't think of themselves as Northerners.
I can see that. We group everybody, like, it doesn't matter, Midwest, West, like, there's no distinction. If you're
We're all
outside,
Northerners.
yeah. It's just how it is. For some reason, I guess that's the mentality. I mean, we're talking about, I lived in Arkansas, and that was, I think, the last state to come back into the Union.
Right.
So there's very much so still this very separatist mentality where we are in the South and then everybody else is in the North.
Right.
Everybody else is a bunch of liberals.
Well, one of your recent episodes, you actually title it something about the Mason-Dixon line, and I remember when I saw it pop up on my iTunes, I started laughing because I was like, it may be short of the bordering states, the northern bordering states. I can't imagine ever using the Mason-Dixon line unless I was in class.
No, that's very common. Like, before living here, I really would tell people I've only been above the Mason-Dixon line 3 times. anyone who lives up there.
That's so interesting. I mean, this really does show you like how weirdly we're way too big. Like America is way too big that we have this many divisions that it would never occur to me, who has lived all over this country. It would never occur to me to think about the Mason-Dixon line as a real thing, or to think about the division between the North and South. Although I will mention the South, but I don't refer to the North as the North.
Well, people in the South are still calling you people Yankees, so
The closest I've come to that actually is living in Boston, because they do refer. There is a lot of Yankee-esque, there's a lot of old Americana and Revolutionary War things and stuff like that. So you get it there a little, but not, I think, in the same context that I've heard it from your show with you talking about being a Southerner and how unusual the North is to you because of your lack of experience of it.
Yeah, and my expectations of what it was going to be like.
Yeah.
Like in my head, it's just like I went through the Underground Railroad, but I have to remind myself that one, my life was not at risk. I did not have to follow a conductor through dangerous conditions.
You're like, I'm just in a Tercel or a Corolla and like whatever, driving across the border.
Honestly, it felt like that. I don't understand why.
That's so
I mean,
funny.
maybe it's because I'm dating a 100% Dutch person, and I've never met a 100% anything in my life,
Oh, okay.
to my knowledge. I mean, I don't go around asking people for their blood quantums, but I'm dating a 100% Dutch person, which causes many jokes in between us. But
Are they Dutch or are they American Dutch from the North in those states that everybody is sort of Dutch heritage?
I'm in an area of West Michigan where they're like Dutch because we don't mix is a thing. Like we marry other Dutch people. We eat banket.
Okay, what is that?
It is a delicious almond, I think, pastry. My boyfriend does not care about culture, or particularly his culture, very much at all. So it's me going, I want to learn your culture. He's like,
Funny.
it doesn't matter.
It's
I'm
the same with
mildly
my
white.
husband. He's mixed, but not mixed in a way where he grew up with that knowledge. Like he's German Palestinian, but didn't know he was Palestinian until he was an adult, and so he thinks of himself as white, and I don't see white when I see him. So
Yeah.
we have very different views of who he is.
The only time my boyfriend will call himself Dutch is if it's on the tail end or before a joke about me.
Oh, funny.
Yeah. So, because I think on his side there would be some pushback if we were to announce our relationship, which we have no plans to.
You mean like to his family or...
Some of his, yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And my family isn't my family's complicated, but there have been some jabs about me dating a white person. I was like, excuse me, no one gave me jabs when I dated an African from Cameroon. Why am I getting jabs for
Especially
dating
because you
a
do
Dutch-
have white heritage, right?
Yeah, I'm half Irish and German.
Yeah. And then you talked about also finding out that you had some actual indigenous, or did you think that you did and you found out you didn't? I forget. It's been a while since I listened to your earlier episodes, but
Yeah, that was one of the earlier ones. I always knew that I had a significant amount of indigenous heritage. I don't want to say blood, because blood quantum to me is like really touchy, or I see it very
especially
negatively.
where like Native American is concerned.
Exactly. But I have a lot of indigenous heritage on my dad's side. I always knew that, but my dad is like the most self-hating, culturally wise black person I've ever met.
My dad was that way too.
I didn't realize that till I was older, but he really distanced us from both the Black and the Native Indigenous sides. So it was left to me to really discover what in the world was going on and try to get in touch with that side.
Mm.
And so he'd always said that we were Cherokee, but we were rejected because he applied in the 90s when the Cherokee Nation was going through all of that with, I don't know if that you knew about it, but the freedmen.
I remember something when I was in high school about proving certain percentages
Yeah.
of
And
blood.
it became a big deal in the, not the Eastern Band Cherokee, the ones in Oklahoma in that area. It became a big deal because when they set the slaves free, there was a group of Africans or African Americans. I guess at that point they're still Africans. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, closer at least in terms of time,
Right.
distance and time from Africa.
Yeah. It gets a little touchy when you get back there and you're like trying to label people, but
Mm-hmm.
they settled on Cherokee land and they had always lived on Cherokee land, but there was very little, from what I understand, there's very little intermarrying.
Mm.
So I don't know what the controversy. I was born in 91, so I don't know exactly what was going on in the 90s, but I do know that the Cherokee Nation was trying to take away those that group of freedmen's descendants, take away their ability to claim Cherokee heritage just because they've been living on Cherokee land.
I see.
Yeah, and my dad told us that we were rejected. We have enough Cherokee blood, he told us, to be registered, but they rejected us when they saw he was Black and just assumed that he was one of those descendants. Come to find out, we weren't even belonging to that Cherokee band. We're Eastern Cherokee. We came
Mm.
from the Eastern Cherokee band and Choctaw, and we're enough to be registered still. So that's something that I've been talking to my cousin about, who's very, very involved in the community. I don't want to get registered or go through anything like that until I feel that I'm participating enough in the culture
Right.
to say
I
that.
kind of agree with that.
Because I don't think it would be fair to just because I have enough of that claim that status.
Yeah, I feel the same because I'm technically half white because both of my parents were biracial half white, but I don't
Um,
know the German Irish side. My grandfather, who is like Appalachian early settler Virginian,
yeah.
I didn't know him. I met him maybe 5 times in my whole life. The last time I saw him I was 12, and then he was gone. He could still be alive. I have no clue. So it's hard for me to like really celebrate or get excited about my German Irish heritage because I don't know the breakdown. I don't know really what happened. We have ideas about what happened.
Mm.
But the British side, I do feel I can identify with because I was raised around my British grandmother.
Yeah, I remember you saying something about that.
So yeah, I do feel comfortable claiming my British heritage because I grew up in the house where my nana lived with us for a period of time. I've eaten British food. I drink tea the way a Brit does, things like that. So I feel more comfortable thinking of myself as triracial because I am, but or tri-ethnic, I guess more accurately. And then in terms of my cultural identification, I'm hierarchical in that I'm Black first, and then I'm Japanese, even though percentage wise those are the same, and then British also percentage wise those are the same, but culturally I was more immersed in Black culture and Black
Mm.
family, and then my next immersion was Japanese family, not community.
Yeah.
So like culturally in my family we were Japanese, and then British as well. So like it was so weird also to be raised by a self-hating Black man who had us growing up in the hood around Black folks and going to Black churches, but really always kind of dismissing Blackness. And yet here I am, like just mad that I didn't come out a little bit darker, so I don't have to explain myself so often to non-Black people what I am.
I actually just talked to someone about that. I don't wish for a different color change. I I like the way I came out. it is interesting because my three siblings and we all came out very different looking.
Mm-hmm.
Some of my features look heavily Native American, but not quite. They're more, some people get them confused with Asian, so I look like I'm mixed with some kind of Asian.
I would agree
Uh,
with that. Looking through your Instagram, there's when your hair is straight, I
yeah.
see that you're native in some way, or that you're Asian because of
hmm
the like the turning of your head or your whatever
I
kind of
have a very
changes
low
your.
nose bridge. It's like my glasses sit on my cheeks, and
So do mine, because I
uh,
got no bridge. I'm Japanese.
yeah, I have no nose bridge because Choctaw. Like, who? I don't know who gets the blame for my lack of a nose bridge,
Well,
but
they at
somebody
least come
does.
over from Asia, however long ago. So you can
I mean, that makes
imagine a shared
sense,
ancestor, a shared ancestral grouping of some
right?
sort before they come to this land.
And sometimes when you see an indigenous person, it's like certain indigenous people, I can see if they get asked if they're Asian too.
Right.
So some of the same features are shared from that ancient ancestry.
Yeah.
But I don't remember, was it the Bering Strait?
The Bering Strait, yeah.
Yeah. But mostly people just are confused by me, and I don't care.
I just love hearing another mixed person say that because that
They're
is
just
really what
confused.
happens.
Um, I was talking to my boyfriend's best friend, um, and we were talking about code switching.
Hmm.
He's into linguistics, and I am as well. And we were talking about Ebonics as you could kind of identify it as a dialect.
Oh, I hate
Um,
the term though. I hate that we settled on the name Ebonics. When I first got into high school, that's when they settled on it. And I was just like, really? We're gonna go with Ebonics?
I don't know anything about it, and the only reason I know it's a term is because I got in trouble by one of my friend's parents in high school for not speaking Ebonics. And
What?
I was like, yes, yes. So he gave me a ride home, and his children are in the car with me, and he's just grilling me on my blackness. Like, do you know who this civil rights person is? What church do you go to?
Did
Because,
you talk
of
about
course,
this on your show once?
no, I
You
have
did?
not yet.
Oh, for some reason it seems really familiar, but maybe it's just like all of our stories.
It may
We
be.
all have this.
We all get confronted by the black parent.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he was like asking me what church I go to because that's a really big deal in Hot Springs. A lot of things are segregated. The churches, for sure, are still majorly segregated.
Yeah.
Just all this stuff. And when I said I didn't speak Ebonics, he asked me why, and I was like, because I wasn't allowed growing up,
Mm.
and I was just really uncomfortable and questioning. And he's, oh my gosh, he got so mad at me.
Yeah, that's not your fault. You're a kid.
Yeah, I was like 15, 16. I was like, leave me alone.
Right.
I at that time I had relaxed hair, and I was one of the only, there were two mixed kids in my high school as far as mixed with black, and I was like, don't talk to me. I don't
Right.
I don't even know what I am. It took me to college to be very secure in my looks and things like that.
Did you um from excuse me, from that, like as a child, you understood that you were mixed and just that culturally you were whatever you were allowed access to, or what did you think about yourself before you started to figure out what you were?
So, when I was very young, I was painfully oblivious. I didn't care about what people looked like. I used to, my parents are very conservative religiously, and there's a little Muslim girl, and I made friends with her, and my parents were like, oh God, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That happened to me with my dad too.
I didn't care. I came up to them. I was like, Mom, Dad, did you know that Allah is another name for God? And they're like,
Uh-oh.
and I was like 6, and I thought I learned this cool new thing, and did not know that I was about to get locked in a closet. Like,
Oh my gosh.
you know what I mean? So
Yeah. I like
I
I feel like I had this same type of thing. It was whether they were a Muslim or Jehovah's Witness or something that was non like born again. We
mm,
we he would walk us over to their house and be like, "My daughter can't play with your kids."
Oh, my parents were nice in the deal about it. They'd just be like whisper, because the South is all about like appearances. You can't just
Right.
do that. It's like you're pleasant to them, but you're not nice to them. You're pleasant enough to not cause trouble, and then but when behind closed doors, when you go home, your parents are like, no, you cannot go
Mm.
play with them. Do not talk to them. Do blah 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 blah. And I was like, oh, why? They're my friend. But I didn't notice racial differences. Not until my first day of kindergarten.
Mm.
My parents enrolled me and my brother in an all-white school. I have mentioned this in my podcast before. There's only one boy in seventh grade who was black, and then us.
Mm.
Darren was in pre-K, and I was in kindergarten. And the whole rest of the school was white. And I don't know if some of these kids had just never seen anyone who wasn't white before. I don't know what the deal was, but
Oh.
I just remember from that first day, I had, in the 90s, there was a limited source of hair care products. My mom would use mousse for white people in my hair. So it's crunchy. Uh,
White moms, please go to black hair salons and learn
yes,
how to
yes,
take care of your kids. I don't know how many
yes.
times I have to say it.
I spent half my time either in with my really long hair scrunched up with mousse,
Oh
or
gosh.
done up like as a child who has fully black hair, which I do not. I have very fine, very soft hair, but it's very dense. And she would put me in all those colored barrettes with the eight sections on your head. So it was very extreme with my hairstyles because she never knew what to do with my hair.
Right.
But I remember the first day of kindergarten getting called spaghetti head.
Okay,
Yeah.
kids.
And having kids rub my skin and ask me why my skin was dirty.
Okay, see, this actually hasn't come out on the show yet, but it happens, and this baffles
Mhm.
me. Like, I do not understand what it is about whiteness that thinks that skin is dirty or that we taste like chocolate or
Oh,
whatever, depending on the shade
yeah.
of our skin.
It's
I
always food. It's always
It's
food.
always food, right? And there's nothing like this. There's no reverse of this that I've ever heard of. Like if a white kid comes to a predominantly black space and they're just like, "What are you made out of? Do you taste like
Peaches
vanilla?"
and cream.
Yeah, right. Like I never have heard the reverse of this thing. I do not understand what it is about whiteness because you imagine it's happening even when these kids aren't really properly exposed to racism, just kind of maybe just subtly exposed to it, and they don't really know that they're being hateful. I
Right. I mean, you're 5 in kindergarten. I was 4, but um, you're very young. And so you're either repeating something from your parents or they genuinely had never seen anyone as dark as me.
Yeah.
And so for a 5-year-old to say, maybe my skin's dirty, I can kind of like see it, but for me,
Were you
I
darker as a kid? Because you're very pale now, but
I
you are
am.
obviously non-white to me, or at least non-fully white, depending on what people see in you.
Yeah, that's what makes me confusing now is because
Yeah.
I'm so pale.
And now
People,
that you're living in the north,
yeah, it
you're
makes
gonna
it get worse.
you're gonna stay pale.
I don't care as long as I don't have tan lines. That's all I care about. But yeah, I'm white, like pale enough, but they can tell there's something wrong with me. It's all,
Oh
there's something off.
no.
Um, an older person has asked me if I had a touch of the tar brush, which is a very antiquated. Yeah, yeah,
Wow, that's digging in the crates on on
yes. They
racism.
were very old, and I wonder if they were senile or like
Wow.
approaching some kind of mental fragility. So they pulled out from the back in the day
Wow.
thing. But yeah, I was dark as a kid. I can send you a picture of me as a kid if you want. But
Yeah.
I played outside all the time. I was a very active little kid. my mom didn't want us to get diagnosed with anything, but probably both my brother and I, a little bit of the ADHD, uh, had problems with the sitting still. But I was darker then, and my hair was very confusing to people. I Hair is a touchy topic in the Black community,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't want to seem like I'm trying to distance myself, but I don't have black hair.
You and I are the same. I have hair that can look like black hair depending on what I do to it,
Yeah.
but it is way closer to Asian hair. In fact, it just is Asian hair, I think. The only thing is that it responds to humidity the closer to the way black hair responds
Same.
to humidity. So, again, I can put my hair styles. I can have traditionally black hairstyles, but you can tell that my hair isn't exactly correct for the style.
That's how mine is, except with my recent surgeries and things like that. It's changed my curl pattern,
Oh, really?
and very negatively. It's affected my hair. My hair is very long and it's healthy, but my curl pattern in sections is gone.
Oh, so you have like some straight areas and some curly, deeply curly
Yeah.
areas?
So that's why I've been keeping my hair straight. So on my Instagram for some kind of brown, I mostly have my hair. I think all my pictures, my hair is straight. But if you go on my personal Instagram, my hair is very rarely straight. But
Well,
this
yeah, I guess I'm kind of
time.
surprised seeing the picture that I'm looking at you now is curly, and I'm used to seeing you with straight hair, so yeah.
Yeah. But I've had too many medical problems in the last couple of years, been exposed to too many. I've had too much, what's the word I'm looking for? Anesthesia. I've had too much medicine. And so my hairstylist was like, it's best if you keep your hair straightened, if not at the very least blow dried. Like right now it's blow dried and in braids, because my hair will get fairy knots. It'll curl up, like individual strands will curl up and knot in themselves. And the last 3 or so inches just don't want to curl, in addition to the patches. So
That's interesting.
yeah, so I might have to keep my hair straight for the foreseeable future.
You said relaxed earlier when you were a kid. Did
Yes.
was that because it was easier for your mother to take care of your hair?
No, I begged her for it.
Oh, you did?
So yeah, because after that first day of kindergarten, I came home crying and asking my mom if I could be white too.
Oh.
It wasn't that I understood that I was something else. All I understood was that I was different from the other kids in class.
Right.
So I didn't understand. I mean, you don't understand race when you're that little. You just know you don't look like everyone else.
Right, yeah.
And now that I'm older, I know it's a terrible movie, but Pocahontas, Aladdin, and Mulan were my favorite
I
Disney
get it.
movies.
You find yellow, brown people, and you're like, those are the closest people that look like me, and
Exactly.
you glom onto it. I 100%, like, I had the same experience. Mulan was a big deal for me, even though I was close to an adult by the time it came out, because even though she was Chinese, it was like, well, they don't have a Japanese one, and white
Right.
people think we're all the same anyway, so yay, Mulan,
I didn't know she wasn't my culture. She looked like me.
Right.
But the only difference was all three of those Disney characters had straight hair.
Yeah.
And I would obsessively watch those 3 movies. I had the costumes from each movie, and I would act out scenes. And I remember specifically being really upset that I couldn't reenact the scene where Pocahontas is Miko's braiding her hair, because it was straight and it just braided really easily.
It wasn't like 24 hours of pain.
Right? And then like the wind blows and her hair goes everywhere, and I was like, I want my hair to blow in the wind. And I remember very vividly that after I got my hair relaxed the first time, 1, I cried. 2, I got
How
an
old
orange
were you when
pop-up
that happened?
push. 7.
Oh no, your hair wasn't ready.
No, it was okay. In addition to it not being ready, my hair cannot handle relaxers. It's eventually why I cut all my hair off. I did the big chop later in my life, because I have extremely fine hair.
Yeah.
There is not a relaxer made
No.
for my hair. And it was taking out the hair around. My hair was falling out. My hair, 1, wasn't ready when I was 7, but I was totally fine. And I remember skipping across the parking lot looking at my shadow going, I'm finally become.
Oh no. Yeah, my mom's a hairstylist, and when I was little, though, she wanted me to present a little blacker, so she gave me a perm when I was like 3.
No.
All my hair fell out, and eventually came back, and like, so even my texture changed, like whatever damage that was caused then. And also she tried to hot comb my hair once and it broke off my hair. So there's like several times that my hair broke off and had to start from scratch, and that's why I have the hair that I have now. Once she finally went to hair school, though, when I was like 7 or 8, but she didn't let me curl my hair again until I was 14, because then my hair was finally mature enough to handle it.
Yeah.
But same type of thing where, I would braid it in multiple braids so that I can unbraid it and it would look curly when I was younger and stuff like that. But yeah, our hair was not ready for the damage that was caused by
And now if I straighten my hair, it's, unless I get into humidity, it looks and behaves like white hair.
Do you do a flat iron or
A flat iron. I'm scared of chemicals now.
Yeah, I bet, yeah.
But I'm considering them again, not because I want to go back to that necessarily, but because my hair texture has changed and there's really no guarantees that I'll ever get my curls back.
Right.
Especially because I have a lot of the conditions that I have are permanent. So I'm always going to be on a lot of medication, and I get my esophagus dilated once every 2 to 3 months. So I go under anesthesia for that.
And medicine does change your hair a lot. That's also another thing my mom would tell me. She could always tell when someone was on drugs, whether they were like hard street drugs or prescription, because of what it would do for their hair. And then sometimes she'd just have to tell them, you have to grow your hair natural, because there's no way I'm putting a relaxer in your head when you're under all of these medications. So, and
my stylist said I might need to consider not a relaxer, because my hair already falls out with relaxers, but some kind of chemical solution to straighten my hair, because she doesn't think my curls are ever going to come back, which saddens me a little bit, because I have pretty curls,
so
but
pretty, yeah.
I had just found them again,
Yeah.
But if that's what needs to happen for the health of my hair, I'll definitely be willing to do it. But part of me, it's strange. When you're part Black, it's so tied to your identity. And part of me feels like when I did the big chop, I was fully embracing that Blackness within me. So now if I go back to chemically straightening my hair, am I rejecting that Blackness again? I don't ever want someone to... Right. I'm very light-skinned. I can't do anything about it,
It also reminds you of, like, how much Blackness was erased through trying to mimic whiteness in, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, stuff like that, to where now we're actually in a place where we can embrace our natural hair, but you have your body telling you it's not gonna work.
Right. It's destroyed its own curl pattern. So I'm feeling a little conflicted. This is very recent, so it's something I don't know.
Remember what I told you? We're going to start out thinking we're going to talk about one thing, and then something else crept up? You weren't thinking about this when we started talking.
We were in a very different direction.
We were in a totally different realm, which we could get into if you want to, but I just realized, I'm like, we are now 30 minutes into this discussion, and we haven't touched back to what we were talking about earlier at all, and now we're talking about hair, and we didn't even think we were going to go there.
Well, we've talked about hair and how it's tied to our identity. I'm sure, like, anybody who's listening who's mixed with Black understands the struggle I'm going through right now, even no matter what their hair texture is, because for some of us, I have a bunch of freckles. I have freckles. I am now obviously pretty pale, pretty light skinned. For some of us, our hair is the only identifier, or like obvious identifier, that we're Black.
Well, in your case, let me ask this then, because in my case, you see I present very yellow looking or whatever, but I have Black features, and so Black people can always tell that I'm Black, but white people can't tell I'm Black. Asian people can't even tell I'm Asian, or they think I'm Filipino. Most people think I'm Dominican or Puerto Rican. Because I'm yellow, but I can see vaguely Black looking. In your case, do you get clocked for Black when your hair is straight or curly?
No.
Not by Black people?
No.
Really? So you're not seen?
I'm not. The only time Black people might consider me Black, like, well, I'm always obviously mixed. So no one's gonna think that I'm full Black.
But they think Asian, not Black.
Exactly.
Mm.
They think I'm Blasian at the very least.
Okay, well, you get a little bit of Black in there if they think that.
Yeah, but I don't have any, but that's only after talking to them. So if they guess, they never touch on Black when my hair's straight. But when my hair's curly, that's the only reason they guess. And I've had many people tell me that the only reason I guessed you're part Black is because of your hair. But then I get insulted more because I'm like, are Black people the only people with curly hair? I'm half Irish. That could come from that.
It's true, but you know, when American folks, regardless of race, are thinking curls, or Irish curls, they're thinking red hair.
Oh, that's true. That's true. But I don't know. Black people, they only really claim me after they know I'm part Black, and only if I meet certain standards.
Of behavioral Blackness?
Not necessarily of behavioral Blackness. I've always been accused, even in my adult life, of acting too uppity or too white.
Uppity, again, another thing that is mostly brought up in the South and not.
Oh, is it?
Yes, it's another one of those identifiers. If I hear someone call a light-skinned Black person or a mixed Black person uppity, I know that they have roots in the South, 100%.
I had no idea.
Maybe a little bit on the East Coast, just because, like I said, the northern section does kind of connect down to the old times or whatever. But yeah, you don't hear that shit in California. You don't hear that on the West Side, not at all.
Wait, do Black people police other Black people?
Of course,
Okay,
but
it's still that.
it's just different terminology.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
like there's certain identifying words that just scream Southern when you hear them as a Californian when I hear it. And since because my family has roots in the South, and then I also lived in I mean Texas, like you could say South or not South depending on what state you're in. I know everybody has different feelings, but it felt very South.
Depends on what side of
Yeah.
Texas.
And like, I mean, I was in Austin, which is basically New Yorkers and Californians who want to live in Texas. But every now and then every now and then you'd get a good Eastern Texan or something like that. And you're just like, oh yeah, this is still the South. Like it still is. There's things that identify it. But yeah, uppity is a word that you really don't hear out here unless it is hearkening back to a relative or something, where like you have an older relative that just, that's how they talked back then or something like that. But yeah, just
it's very common still to be called uppity.
That's interesting. And okay, now let me ask this question then. Are you uppity because you're light-skinned? Or are you uppity because you, and I'm using quotation fingers, talk white?
It's because I talk white. I guess in modern terms,
yeah,
as the kids would say, I don't have enough swag when I talk or whatever. We were talking about my voice before for another reason. I don't sound very threatening, or I have a very soft voice, soft and high, and for some reason that makes it even worse.
Okay, so the voices that people are used to, like, because you did grow up around predominantly in a white school and things like that, their idea of a Black sounding voice has a threatening tone to it.
Exactly.
God damn, the fucking South. Let's work this out. Let's fix this problem.
Is that not a thing? Like,
yes and no. Black? Yeah, like yes and no. There is definitely a Black sound, and there are. Okay. So I am very much identified because I'm a code switching ninja. I am all the races at any given time. I have been called on it in the workplace.
In college, I had groups of friends that did not mix, and I had a group of Vietnamese friends. I had a group of Black and mixed friends. I had a group of Hispanic friends that I would speak Spanish and they taught me how to dance with. It's whatever I looked like. People claim. Oh, and there's a group of Persian and Indian.
Oh, I can see that people
girls.
Would call you that too. I can see it.
So they all claimed me. They all thought I was what they were. And I didn't know they had claimed me. I just thought I had made friends, you know?
And then they find out that you're not what they thought you were, and they're disappointed at you because of the
No,
trick.
by the time they found out, it wasn't even disappointed. They were like, oh, well, you're already enough like us, whatever.
Oh, funny. See, I had the opposite. I have people figuring out what I am, and they're just like mad at me that their idea of me was wrong. Like, how are you not Filipino? I was like, what the fuck? I'm just, you know. But I get clocked as black if I'm talking to black folks because my code switching does go back to my old accent, my original accent, which is Hood, Long Beach.
See, I don't have that. I don't have that to go back to. So that's actually a learned code for me that that I picked up so that people would stop,
Yeah.
saying things to me.
Interesting that you say it as a learned code, because that is definitely what you're hearing right now, which is my current primary way of speaking. It is a learned thing that I had from when I left Long Beach when I was 16. My aunt basically worked on me to help give me a hireable accent, basically. Because as it is, my name is Sharmane Latrice. So like if I'm Sharmane Latrice, and even though I'm vaguely, I'm at least to a white person ethnic, if they can't figure out what I am. If I'm walking out there with Sharmane Latrice as my name, and then I'm sitting here counting to 10 and saying, why you be playing me or why you be tripping and stuff like that, then, that's not going to fly. I'm going to be identified right away. Whereas now, even with my name, because I talk the way I do and I present the way that I do, when they see my resume and everything like that in a job situation, I see the relief on someone's face as they come to grab me for the interview, and because they're expecting to see Shaniqua because of my name.
Right,
but when they see me, they're like, oh, she's a vaguely Hispanic Asian,
oh my God. Vaguely something.
Yeah, and so they're okay, and then I speak the way that I speak, and so it's okay. But if I'm around black folks and new black people are there, I get accepted right away because they hear my tonation and then they can see it in my face.
No.
But then
I have to go through the checks, like, are you with it? Do you know what's going on culturally? How do you feel about the police? Do you
Oh, really? So you get quizzed in your blackness. How does that make you feel, though? Like, how do you deal with that? Because I don't have that experience. So, like, is it insulting? I imagine it's insulting.
I've talked about this before on my podcast. When I was growing up, I didn't want to identify either as black or white.
Mm-hmm.
My cousin, who I'm talking to, who is Choctaw, came to visit when I was very, very young. And I remember that visit, and he taught me a little bit of the culture, and he taught me some songs, and he took me to some powwows, and I fell in love because everybody was like toasted brown like me, lightly toasted brown like
Got
me.
it. You felt more reflected there.
Yes, I was reflected there and completely accepted. Nobody questioned anything. And to as a little kid who was questioned on the first day of kindergarten, that environment was so welcoming to me. But I only had access when my cousin was here, and then my dad distanced himself from that side of our family, and I lost that connection. So growing up, I would get racism from white people, from black people, and I just wanted nothing to do with either of them, and I just wanted to identify as Cherokee. Like as soon as possible, I wanted to get registered as Cherokee, learn the culture, and hope that no one ever found out I was white or black.
That makes sense to me. I mean, it's heartbreaking, but it makes sense to me. That
and I know
desire.
It sounds terrible too, but I was young.
No, I mean, I don't think it reads as you are horrible because you thought this way. I think it reads as a child who wasn't prepared. Like our parents do not know how to prepare us for our mixedness, because they either, even if they're mixed, they didn't live in a world where they weren't what they presented as. Like, perhaps your dad, I don't know what your parents look like, but like my dad looks black, even though he's half white.
My parents present as white and then black.
Right. My mom looks white because she dyes her hair blonde and she wears green contacts, and she's the palest of her family. If she takes her makeup off, she looks Asian. If she has dark hair, she looks Asian, or like mixed Asian, but she doesn't often present that way. So, and she gets mad that people see her as a white woman and not as an Asian woman. And it's like, bitch, you dyeing your hair blonde. What do you think?
That's actually really funny. When I was blonde, people thought I was white, period.
Yeah.
Period. And that's the first time in my whole life people accepted me as white without me having to say anything. Not that I ever fought for being white. It was just the first time no one ever asked. And
Right.
and then if something happened, they'd be like, "You're not white?"
Yeah, like you just incognigroed and they're all horrified because they don't know what secrets they told you.
Right. Oh. So I've when I was blonde, there's a reason I'm not blonde anymore. Because I just got so uncomfortable with people telling me. I had a woman I was religious at the time, at church, come up to me and be like, "Ah, isn't it crazy what's going on in the world today?" And I was like, "Yeah, what do you mean?" And she's like, "Oh, all these black people just blaming the police."
Wow, just that's how we're opening our conversation? Jeez.
I knew her. And that's the thing. I knew her. I thought she knew.
Isn't that weird? So there's only times around white people where they don't know that I'm black and they just say things. Even though I'm not white presenting, they'll just say things because they think in some way we're teammates, and you're just like, do I come out the closet right now? Because
Well, I came out. I was like, "You do know I'm one of those, right?"
yes, queen.
And she just looked at me and she's like, "Well, I'm gonna go get some sandwiches."
You better get yourself a sandwich.
I was like, "Okay, I'll talk to you later." And when I started dyeing my hair back, I think maybe not everyone knows this, but when you go really blonde, you can't just go black. You have
Right.
to go brown and then darker
Ease it up.
brown and stuff like that. So when I first dyed my hair brown, I had someone pull me aside and um, tell me I was being a bad example by dyeing my hair an unnatural color.
Huh?
Yeah. I stared at him and I said, "What do you mean an unnatural color?" He's like, "What happened to your beautiful blonde hair?" And I said,
Ew.
"A bottle. It came out of a bottle."
Right? No blonde that looks great as a blonde isn't treated in some kind of way. Like, there's so few, like, natural blondes that just are out there looking like queens, you know? Most of them need some kind of enhancement for that to work.
I was just, I'm still kind of speechless about it, but as
Also, brown is one of the hair colors, bitch. Like,
I know there are just so many things wrong with that, but because of all that, back to your original question, because I'm crazy and I go off on
fine, keep it
tangents,
going.
but I think I would be more insulted by having to pass through the hoops for people who are black to accept me as black if I didn't have that experience growing up where I didn't want to be black at all.
I see.
So now I just expect both white people and black people to try to put me through these hoops to justify whatever I am. And I feel no need whatsoever to justify myself as an Irish person. I grew up with that culture. I know a lot of traditional songs. I went with my friend who is like redheaded, freckled. Her family's from Ireland. I went to her with to session at Irish pubs when we were in college. I don't care. Like, if you don't see me as Irish, that's your problem.
Right.
But I also kind of feel the same way about black people, but for some reason, I want more acceptance there. But I still have this very strong drive to be seen as an Indigenous woman.
I see that. And I think, like, what you're saying isn't much different than I feel or anything that I've heard across the board on the show so far. It's any of us that are mixed with black, primarily. Sometimes it is any OC, non-black OC, but most of us that are mixed with black, we all tend to want to, if not identify more on the black side, be at least accepted more on the black side. And in some case, there's only one case in which the person actually says it in my show on my very first episode, where he says, you know, he presented light-skinned black and he was only raised by his white side, and so he's like kind of fighting to be seen as white because he stood out so much in his family. Shout out to John Corbin, he's awesome. But, like, you know, I think most of us have this thing where it's just like, as a mixed person who is racially ambiguous, we just want someone to clock us for something, you know. And I know no one's ever going to walk up to me and be like, you must be an eighth Irish, an eighth German, and a quarter, you know, Caucasian British. You know, that's never, ever, 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 ever going to happen to me. Even if I'm standing next to my British family, which in most cases, when I have stood next to my British family, I have been asked, what is the relation between, like, how are you guys in the same space? Because you don't look like you could possibly be family. Whereas the black side is a lot easier. Even though I present very yellow, I look black feature wise, and I am first black in behavior. The presentation most people get of me now is a code switch, because my actual code is black. And so I feel that, like, if someone just comes up to me and accepts me as black without any question and without ever having a conversation, that is a way more fulfilling interaction for me than someone, even as a mixed person who's like out here trying to be professionally mixed and shit with my podcast and everything. Yeah. You know, if someone just automatically accepts me as black, I do not question it. I just let it wash over me, and I'm excited. I'm never accepted as Japanese from Japanese people. You know, my family, of course.
Yeah, that's how it is with white. Like, if for some reason, if you're mixed, if you touch anything to white, you're no longer part of that community.
White. Yeah. And
I've just kind of accepted that, and I just want to be identified as an indigenous black person.
And that makes sense to me, because, like, we come from cultures, you know, there are aspects of both of our various cultures that they do kind of leave an arm's distance to mixed folks, but they are primarily more accepting, I think, at least in my experience, black folks. But you said you had the experience with your indigenous side too, where they were, you know, far more accepting than you've ever felt in any white space. And even as you have white people in your family or white friends, or, you know, you work in a white environment and you do feel that you have allies or love, we will never really understand each other. Yeah. Because I can't maneuver the world as a white woman. I never will be able to, even as I am half white. I am a quarter black, but I can maneuver the world as a black-ish woman.
Like I said, I only maneuvered through the world as a white woman for a period of a couple months, and it was the scariest thing I've ever done, because because you don't get the nice side of some white people anymore. Then you get to see, like, the real nitty-gritty depth. And I'm not saying every white person is like that, but just like that lady, you know, those black people on the police, you know. I am going through this weird thing, which I'm going to talk about in the future on my podcast, but I'm going through this thing where I'm trying to resist the people of color and then white people. But you know what? White people you're not helping me.
Right.
You're not helping me see you as immediately, like, not my friend. It's a very strange place to be in this world. And I understand feeling bad for white people who who are not racist, but there is a certain amount of accountability.
Yes.
That is there when it's unfortunate, but our country has a very bad history, where from the people of color side, white people have a bad rep. I mean, who didn't they persecute in the beginning of this country? Right. And it's still going on.
Or globally, like, just globally.
Right. And so you do kind of I feel like there is a little bit of a test that we have for white people. Like, are you going to, I've been called the N-word multiple times. When I was younger, there was someone add let to the end of it when I was a kid. It's because in the environment I grew up in, it's still used in a very violent, very pointed way. So it's very hard for me to voice, because it's been used negatively against me and my family as well. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess there might be some places in the North, because I've heard there are, like, certain pockets of white extremists.
Oh, Boston sucks for racism. Like, Boston is the most racist place I've ever lived. And if I ever have to go back for a visit or something like that, or in a professional manner, I'll go, but I'll never go if I don't have to. It's extremely segregated area. There is a black part of town, there is an Irish part of town, there is an Italian part of town, and then there's kind of where all the other, like, generic white folks live. A lot of the language, like the colloquialisms and stuff like that, are you need context to understand why it's okay for them to say what they said. You know, they have to explain it to you if you're not from there. Yeah, it's a rough place, and
I mean, part of
White
it's
folks,
because
white folks
all the
don't know.
northern places are the same. So like,
Oh, I think it's a lot different. I will say, and a lot of people also will mistake California as being so liberal that they couldn't possibly be.
I
But
thought it was.
LA is also the place where we had the LA riots, where they let cops who beat the fuck out of Rodney King go. It's where the Rottweilers were. It's like LAPD is still to this day something that terrifies me because I grew up down here.
And
And
I've heard that, and I think my brain is broken. So I've spent so many years thinking like everywhere outside the South is like this beautiful, wonderful place.
I
Like,
heard you say that on your show, and I was like, no, no, it's not like that.
I'm learning that there are pockets where it's not the case. And it's not like I don't know. I've
Mhm.
heard about things in Chicago. I've heard about things in New York. I've heard about things in LA. But like my brain's like, oh, that's the other LA. Like,
Like LA is this kind of thing where it's like an extremely segregated and racist. It's segregated by both race and class. So once you become a rich person of color, you now cross over into the white space. You're still somewhat on the outside of it, but you now get you now get the treatment of rich
you can come in the
whiteness.
door.
Yeah. It's okay, or at least you can go to like the side room while we're all in the ballroom and you're like in the
Oh,
adjoining.
that sentence is just so icky.
You know
Oh
what I'm
my
saying?
God.
Like it's like that. And there's a lot of white people here who think of themselves as allies, and they're so overdone in it that you feel how racist they are because they're trying so hard to prove that they're not.
Like white saviors, or they're just working too hard to prove they're not?
It's hard to describe it, and I wish I had a term for it, but it's something like you know the idea of a white person saying they can't be racist because they have a black friend.
Yeah.
It's that, except for they don't even want to say necessarily like, and they want to step it up and be like, my sister has kids with a black guy, and so I have like mixed nieces and nephews or something
Weird.
like that. Like they need you to know that it's like in their family.
Weird.
And so you get that, and you also get this thing of like, I'm really here to, yeah, I guess white savior would be good in this case, where it's really like, I'm here for, I'm using, gosh,
My privilege
this sucks
to.
because we're asking them to use their privilege to help, but at the same time there's folks here that use their privilege to help in a way where it's like, I'm the one, come to me,
Hmm.
I'm gonna make it happen. And it's, yeah, it's,
So the motivations are not the same.
that's the difference. It's like a real ally never has to tell you that they're an ally.
Hmm. I think my friends that I've made up here so far, and my boyfriend, if anyone ever said anything to me, they would be like crazy defensive, let me kill them. I'm also like super short, so.
Yeah, I mean, I have that kind of friend too. I have a lot
But
of like white friends that I would say are primarily allies, but there's education that needs to happen.
yeah, like they wouldn't like have racial discussions necessarily to go to
Mm,
bat for. They just don't have the knowledge
right.
about it. Because I'm in West Michigan, which is a pretty white area. Didn't know that was gonna happen, but um, I mean, I don't mind. I don't mind being in a primarily white area. We're right outside the city where it's not, but I don't really have any white friends that are educated enough or understand enough to be, I don't know, I want to say motivated to defend the general people of color. I think
Right.
they'd probably just stay out of it unless it strictly involved me, and then they would be in defense of me.
And that's the thing that I think whiteness needs to understand is that you can't just be a advocate against racism for somebody you know. You
Yeah.
have to see the injustice across the board and feel just as assaulted by it, I think, as people of color. Like this is something that I don't think that the general white person understands is if I'm in a room and a white person is being racist to a Mexican person and I am not Mexican, I do not see a white person being racist to a Mexican. I see a white person being racist.
Exactly.
And
Same.
so I'm out here like I'm jumping in. It was
Yeah.
like, why are you so problematic? Turn it back onto you. And now I'm in, not just allyship with the person, the Mexican person in that moment, but like we are the same. We are the
Yeah.
of color at that moment, and I need to band together with my brother or my sister to defeat this thing.
Yeah,
Now,
I had the same mindset. Like, I won't stand by.
yeah, you can't. And I need white people to feel that way. I need white people to feel that compulsion to be like, you know, I'm not, and not in the way where they're going to say I'm colorblind or anything like that, because that's not a
Oh
thing.
my gosh, that's just as bad.
I need them
I
to
think.
see a person being attacked for something
Yeah.
that's unreasonable, and so their humanity and their empathy makes them insert themselves into the moment, and not as a white savior, but as a person that
A
is
fellow human
a
being.
fellow human being who was also assaulted by that moment. Like, you
Yeah.
shouldn't have to come from the group that is being disenfranchised to feel disenfranchisement. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it degrades all of us if we're in the room when it happens,
Yeah.
regardless of whether or not
Especially
we're
if you stand by, because you're gonna get lumped in with
right.
the person. Like, if you're silent on a subject when it's being brought up around me, and I'm hearing this subject, and you don't say something,
Right.
I'm going to assume you're on the other side. But these friends, so far, like, I don't feel they're there. I feel like they're at the point where they just feel uncomfortable, like they're afraid that they don't have a place to speak up, but they want to. And that makes me feel more secure around them.
That's a strange thing too, because it's almost like they need a person of color to give them permission, and then they get the permission and they can go out there and be warriors. I see this happen, and I wonder
Yeah.
what do you do? Like, it's the same thing happens on my show with guests who haven't had a chance to be around other mixed race people or talk about mixedness, is that, or especially if they're white presenting. I've had several white presenting people say that they needed to hear me refer to them as mixed, or see it in their face in some way, where I get a picture, I'm like, yeah, I can see that you're not just white. And then now I've validated their mixedness, and now they can walk around being mixed. And I am not the person who's
wow.
handing out that key. Like, it's not like, I am not the queen of all mixed folks, and I'm just here
Yeah.
granting mixedness. But if I'm the gateway that allows somebody to embrace who they are, I'm happy to be that person. But at the same time, like, I feel bad that I am that person
Don't
for
want people to
somebody.
feel like they need that.
Yeah, like, that hurts me as a mixed person, because I have been out here and out of the closet in my mixedness and living out loud for a long time. Doesn't mean I don't go through identity crises. I absolutely do. But I'm out here being mixed and just embracing mixedness,
Yeah.
For the white folks that don't know that it's okay for them to speak up, I think is a very similar idea, right? They need a gateway to grant them permission. And then, even then, though, they will still need to monitor when it's their time to do that on our behalf.
Yeah.
Because you want them to stand up, but you don't want them to overshout our voice,
Right.
It's complicated. Like, white folks who want to be allies, it's gonna fucking suck for you people, because you're gonna get it even from the people you're trying to defend. They're gonna be like, I appreciate it, but, and at the same time we're saying, but I still need you to stand for, like, it's so messy. It's so
Yeah.
messy.
Well, I've tried to explain it to someone who actually asked me how they can, do those things. And I say, I will always be an advocate for the Black community, but there are people in the Black community who don't see my voice as necessary or welcomed, or it's taking the place of someone who could be dark-skinned.
Right.
But I'm always going to advocate
Right.
for the Black
Yeah,
community.
it shouldn't slow you down. It should just alter your path.
Yeah.
And a great example of a mixed race person doing this is, and I never remember how to say her name correctly. It's like Amandla, starts with an S. She was in the Hate You Give, and she's also the inspiration behind the Niobe comic books, which is like a mixed race half elf. It's awesome.
Oh my gosh.
She was offered the role of Shuri. And she turned it down because she said, if Wakanda is a non-colonized part of Africa, my light skin doesn't have a space there. So she turned it down.
I have mixed feelings about that, actually. Except, but that's probably because I don't really have a really good understanding of the universe Wakanda lives in. Because to me, like, they're not colonized, but
they're also segregated. They're fully engulfed in a sphere that
okay,
it's like hidden. So people know Wakanda exists, but they can't go there, or at least the part that they can go is the front presenting Wakanda. So Wakanda is a place where mixed race does not happen.
right, not because of lack of colonization, but just because it's
Because
isolated.
it's isolated, and also they are so powerful that they can't be colonized. Like the world doesn't realize, the world thinks that they're just a tiny and a country full of sheep herders and stuff.
Yeah,
But
isn't
what
it
they
like cloaked or
Yeah,
something?
it's cloaked. So they actually are like the most technologically advanced civilization on the planet, but the world doesn't know. So it makes sense that no white person would have ever
Yeah.
been there.
In that case, I'm comfortable
Yeah. So all
with
the
that.
people are dark skinned, and it would make sense that there would never be a light skinned person there. So I
That makes
respect
sense.
that she did that. And actually, as a mixed person, I was grateful for her to make that call, because, there are ways in which we are erased by being the first something. So Obama is the first black president. No, he's not. He's half
He was the
African
first
and half white,
president as soon as he won, I was livid the day he won. Livid.
because he was
Because
black all of a sudden.
yes, because none of the media called him black until he won.
Exactly. You're right. And so I still don't refer to him as the first black president. I do think of them as the first black family. I
Yeah.
do. But I think of him as a literal African American. His father was from Africa. His mother was American. He is biracial. He is a mixed race president. So for me, as a mixed race person, I need him to champion the mixedness, because I don't want him
Yes.
to detract from the blackness. Like, I don't want him to dilute the blackness for America. So
Yeah,
I need
and
him
I was
to.
excited because it was an opportunity to acknowledge that we are becoming a melting pot in this country and validate the existence of mixed race kids and people in this country. And I feel
Mhm.
like that opportunity was missed.
Right. Whereas something like Halle Berry, who is also biracial, owns being the first black woman to get a Best Actress Oscar, and she refers to herself as black, even though she has a white mom and was raised by a white mom, and even though her child is 3/4 white and a quarter black, she refers to her child as black. And while I understand it, because I
Hmm.
am black, I'm mixed, but I'm black. I get that. But if I'm ever in a position of some sort of fame or award or elitism, I'm going to own my mixedness, because I'm
Yeah.
not going to take away the seat of a full black person or a full Japanese person. Like, I'm a mixed person. I am a conglomeration of a bunch of different things, both ethnically and culturally. So I need to be identified that way publicly.
For me,
And
I just want all the parts of me acknowledged
yeah,
if I'm going to be in the public eye, then you're going to see who I am.
right.
That's the way it feels for me. And I wouldn't claim to be just one thing because for me, that's like publicly denying the rest.
Right. So like when Amandla did that, I respected it, because I don't want to see us dilute blackness for people. I want us to be able to be a part of the family, but understanding that in a fully African story, our colonized blood does not
Yeah.
necessarily fit. But we have our own stories.
We still have a seat at the table.
Yeah. Um, what do you love about being mixed race?
Mm, as much as it can be sometimes a double-edged sword, I like my blendability. Like, I'm very fascinated by other cultures, and because I'm like vaguely whatever, I get to explore different cultures and people accept me into their culture
Hmm.
very easily. So I've been able to like really experience Taiwanese culture in the Taiwanese community and Vietnamese culture and Persian or Iranian culture. I'm really into Bollywood, so I've been able to like learn Bhangra and stuff like that.
Hmm.
I enjoy that even though I'm not part of those racial groups or ethnic groups, I I look enough like to get in the door and so I get to explore and play, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I always think about it as like, because of our ability to code switch, because of our multi ethnic heritages and our culture, multicultural heritages, that we're more open to what is different from us, because we're used to being the one that is called out for being different. And I'm making a pledge to
saying you're different. You can go to all sides.
You can go to all sides, right? And I'm making a pledge, like I've been really working on it this year, to no longer refer to myself as different or us as mixed people as different. I want to refer to them as the other and them as the different.
Interesting.
So that's an effort that I'm trying to make this year, because I've been, for 41 years of my life, I've been calling myself different. And I think, I wonder how that has weathered me as a person, you know, and like played into maybe some of my identity issues. And so if I start to view people, the monoracial folks or the people that are different from me, as different and not me as the different one, then I think that might have some, I'm hoping that it'll have some positive effects on,
that's so interesting,
on my views of things. So yeah, I love that aspect. I do. I love the plug and playness of us.
Yeah, I mean, I've had Vietnamese and Taiwanese people, especially like one of the uncles, actually they were both uncles. So well, as far as, you know, Asian culture, everyone's an auntie, uncle, that kind of thing.
It's really only white people who don't auntie and uncle.
I guess so.
Everybody. I swear, because I have it on the black side, I have it on the Asian side, like everywhere. I like the Latinx, even though I'm not Latinx, I get confused for it. And when I have friends, the same. Auntie, uncle.
Yeah, well, I've had uncles from the Taiwanese community and the Vietnamese community tell me, like, in these words, you look like us, so you might as well speak the language. So I can read Vietnamese now.
Oh, wow.
I've cantored Catholic Vietnamese masses and sang for weddings in Vietnamese.
Wow.
I can sing in Chinese. My spoken Mandarin, like, I can sing in Mandarin. My spoken Mandarin is, like, questionable. I can read Hangul, written Korean, like, just because people are like, you look like us, so why don't you do it? And I used to be conversational in Spanish because they decided I should speak Spanish too. So
oh, I bet well, I guess you're in Michigan, so I don't know how much it is up there, but if you went to Chicago, if you went to New York, people would speak Spanish to you.
People spoke Spanish to me in Arkansas. Like, random people would come up to me and speak whatever language. I've had people come up to me and speak Vietnamese. I've had people come up to me and speak Spanish, and I just look at them and I'm like, that was too fast. So I'm sorry.
That's so funny. Well, why don't you, before we get out of here, why don't you tell everybody how to find your show and all your social media handles and everything like that?
Okay. You can hear Some Kind of Brown on almost every podcast platform: Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, and we do have a Facebook page that you can like and a Facebook group that you can find in the community tab. It's closed, but there's no question, so I'll just accept people as they come in. I just want to protect people who are questioning things, give them a safe space to talk and chat.
Nice.
Also, Some Kind of Brown on Twitter and Some Kind of Brown on Instagram.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was nice to finally get a chance to talk to you. It's weird that I already felt like I had talked to you, but you know, I listen to your show sometimes, so
I listen to yours as well, so it's probably contributed.
Yeah, it's just like, hey, how are you? So yeah, I definitely would love to have you back at some point, and we can get into some of the other topics. And yeah, do you have anything you want to say before you go? I'm
just glad that we both are putting this stuff out there, because there are not a lot of people, I don't want to say advocating necessarily, but that's what we're doing, advocating for mixed race identity people to identify how they want and explore their identities.
Right. Because we both have interacted with other podcasters who are mixed race, but aren't necessarily putting out a mixed race geared thing. And I'm glad that you and I popped up at about the same time, because it shows that we were both searching for something that wasn't out there. And so we created
yours out a month before I did.
Yeah, I remember us being really close in terms of timing. And so it just shows, because I tell people all the time, like when I was searching for mixed race podcasts, they were like newsworthy type,
Or they were dead.
Or they were dead
podcasts.
podcasts, right? You know, it was like a 6 episode thing, or they had been out there for a while, but they didn't have a big enough audience. And listen, like my audience isn't huge yet.
Mine either.
And like I'm gonna keep going because I'm hoping to get a big audience, but I'm doing the show for me because I need this connection.
Exactly.
So like I want you to keep doing what you're doing. I'm keeping doing what I'm doing. I really loved that we have gotten a chance to collaborate on an episode, because right now, as far as I can tell, because I keep doing searches, I think you and I are the only one in the experience aspect of mixedness. Yeah. And so let's keep it going. Let's keep doing it.
I'm excited.
Militantly Mixed is a ManeHustle Media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Sharmane Johnson. Music is by David Bogan, The One. And if you like what you heard on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and wherever you find your podcasts. ManeHustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.